This episode is brought to you by
Co-creation.
Welcome to Leadership Actually. It's not law, it's leadership. Welcome Lisa Powney to Series 5.
Oh my golly, it is Series 5. Welcome, Lee Rogers. How the devil are you?
I am absolutely on cloud 9.
Go on, why?
Soon it's coming home.
This isn't about your cycling, no?
No, we'll talk about cycling probably a little bit. No, England won at the Azteca. We beat Mexico in one of the greatest games I've ever seen, if not the greatest game.
Absolutely, and I got Freddie up and we watched it too, so that's why I need my glasses on today, because my eyes are a bit tired. How are you doing with it all?
Yeah, so my strategy was stay up, and I was reading online and like the different strategies. I think this was the squeeze strategy. So you go up until the match, watch the match, and then just squeeze a few hours in.
Yeah, that's what
So I think that's right. I might have got the strategy wrong, but the only thing was, it was going great until the hour delay, and people will recognise this if they're watching.
Yeah.
I then fell asleep after 30 minutes in the first half. I missed the best bit of the game. I missed 3 goals that I then saw on the highlights clip during half time. So it was a definite messy moment.
It was. Mine's a little bit, because I thought I'd be clever, because my 8-year-old really into football now. He wasn't before, so the World Cup has conversed him. He loves football right now, and so he made me promise I would wake him up. So I thought, oh well, I'll put 2:00, then I might be halfway, and then I'll get him to see the last half. But then it was delayed, wasn't it? So we had to watch the whole match. But I'm so glad I did. It was an amazing match. He was very excited.
But you've let him see the greatest game
I know.
probably
I
of
think
English
I've done a
history,
great thing as a mom.
other than the 1966 World Cup fan.
Absolutely. So yeah, coming home.
It's
And he was playing Wonderwall all the way to school. So
yes,
it's like
that's probably one of the only songs I know all the words to.
so true.
I love it when they do that. And how are you?
I'm really well. Yeah, I'm really good. Yeah, lots going on. Apart from football, and Freddie's really into football. And also lots of stage school stuff going on. So that's been brilliant. He's been on the cinema screen, and he's got an opportunity coming that I might tell you more about in the future. So that's very exciting.
Well, he's a friend of the show now, isn't he?
Yeah, friend of the show. So yeah, taking over from us.
I know. And when I said this morning, Ella said, "Where are you going, Dad?" I went, "I'm going to go and do the podcast." She went, "Oh, so we've not got the gig? Like, I want to come with you."
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, no, it's school, love.
When they're older.
Yeah,
so.
she was a little bit miffed, bless her.
So everything's going great, thank you. Looking forward to the summer, and I'm liking the sun. So can't get my words out now because I've been up.
It's a messy class.
It is.
So let's introduce our esteemed guest today.
Absolutely. Welcome, Medi Kordi, Dr Mehdi Kordi. How are you? Were you up to see the match?
I was. I didn't do the squeeze method.
No.
I tried to go to sleep early. I kept getting woken up by my child, and then eventually I was like, I'm just going to stay awake. So, and I did stay awake, which is good. Yeah.
You look surprisingly good then, definitely.
It's the lighting.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're really excited to have you today. We're going to give you your official introduction and then find out a little bit more about you, if that's
Brilliant.
all right. Okay. So today's guest is someone who has spent his career helping people in teams perform at their very highest level. Dr Mehdi Kordi has worked across elite sport as a scientist, coach, head of performance, and now as a performance leader with one of the world's top cycling teams. Along the way, you've helped athletes achieve Olympic gold medals, many of them, world championships and world records. What really interested us about you wasn't the medals though, it was the way that you think. You have a habit of questioning accepted wisdom, challenging assumptions and reminding us that leadership isn't about having all the answers, it's about asking better questions, which our leaders out there will really benefit from. You've experienced almost every seat around the performance table, from PhD researcher to board advisor. You bring a unique perspective on what it takes to build trust, navigate uncertainty, and create environments where people can perform at their very best. So today, we're going to explore leadership under pressure, why certainty sometimes becomes our biggest trap, what elite sport can teach every leader, and why performance is often far more human than we give credit for.
That is one hell of an intro. Can I have that just for future reference?
Absolutely, absolutely, it's yours.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you.
Thank you. So absolutely, feel honoured that you've come in to see us today. But if we were down the pub or we were at the school sports day, we were just talking about that, and people said, "Who are you?" Or "What do you do?" What would you say, Mehdi?
I tend to steer away from what I do. I just say I work in sport, because then if they hear I'm a coach or anything else, the first thing is like, I do cycling. What should I do?
Yeah.
So I just kind of steer away from it. My wife gets always like jolts me with her elbow, like, tell them what you really do and stuff. But it's quite complicated. I work in sport. I was a coach. I was this, that. So I don't know how I describe myself to people. I just say on the sports day, I say I work in sport, and if I win, I then progress on the dad's race. But I didn't this year. Okay, so let's keep my mouth shut.
Nearly next
Yes,
year.
nearly,
There's always next year.
But that's something I just don't really like. I don't think of myself as a leader or a coach. I just look at how to get the best outcomes, and rather than branding myself as a systems leader or a performance leader, I just want to get the best outcomes, whether it's me, myself,
Yeah.
or within a team, or leading a team.
Amazing. Well, we're going to dive into that a little bit more. But this is the messy class, and we started with a bit of messiness, so we're going to challenge you this time. So our messy question is, before we get into elite performance and leadership, can you take us to a moment in your career where things felt messy, uncertain, or personally difficult behind the scenes, and what that experience taught you about yourself?
I would actually say that my whole career has been messy, and what you've just described there in that question has transcended from the first day to now. You realise when you go into coaching, you think it's just X's and O's, it's tactical, technical, but if you speak to anyone who's been coached by anyone,
Yeah.
you ask them, what was coaching like? Or what was this person like? They never default to the technical side. It's always how they made them feel.
Mm.
And that's the first thing you realise, it's the personal relationship. And humans are naturally messy. As when you go into coaching or leadership, you want everything to fall in place and just be this nice org chart that everyone agrees to and conforms to. But the reality is we're all humans. We all have our own problems. We all have different ways we view life, morals, values. And the biggest thing I learned is like the lens I grew up in, looking at the world, doesn't, like I'm in the minority, and so is everyone else. So he's trying to understand people. So when you talk about messiness, like that's the daily thing I kind of dealt with from day one when I was a PhD student, trying to persuade people to go into a study and trying to get them to commit to things, to now where you're dealing with people who are, you're trying to mentor them through leadership and say, look, stop thinking that people can read your mind and people conform to your values. You have to kind of find the common ground to connect with people to get the best out of them.
I love that. And welcome to the messy class and our human
Fully
side.
paid up member.
Love that. So we've teased people about what you've done in your career, and you started with PhD and up to now. So tell us a bit about your story, Mehdi. Where do you come from, and tell us about how you've got to where you are today.
Sure. I mean, I think the most interesting thing I'll start with is that my success was largely in cycling, or has been in cycling. Now, the normal pathway for people to get into coaching is having been a former cyclist of some degree, failed or otherwise, and you make the natural transition to coaching, as most people do.
Yes.
I've never ridden a bike. I mean, I can ride a bike, don't worry, but just not competitively, not at any discipline, not at any level. So I just was never good at riding a bike. And my passions were in other sports, and I was better at other sports.
Yes.
So that's an interesting arc. So, I mean, I was born in the East Midlands, Loughborough,
Yeah.
and grew up in Cambridge. And I always say I'm Cambridge educated. And when people sort of ask me like, which college I went to, I said until the age of 18. And I went to Manchester, and I went to Manchester University because I read an article that's in the Independent, which I dug out recently, that said Manchester had the highest incidence of sex, drugs and alcohol.
Oh,
And I
okay.
thought, I just want to go there. I just want to go there. So it was for all the wrong reasons. And I studied biomedical science, so nothing to do with sport, and then tried to become an accountant. And I was a horrible accountant. I didn't even pass the first exam. So the 5-metre swim badge in accounting, I couldn't pass.
Not for you.
Not for me, definitely not for me. Thank goodness for people's, other people's sake. And then I just remember just having a bit of a crisis and my dad saying, look, do something you enjoy, because at least if you're not good at it, you want to be there and you'll persist. And I just thought, what do I enjoy most? It was like dealing with humans and people and how people react. So I did a MSc, or Masters in Aerospace Physiology, so how the humans react in extreme environments in aviation space. And that sent me all around the world. So I did a research project in Brazil, my southern part of Brazil, about CPR in space. So that Artemis mission that's just happened, the CPR guidelines was from the research I done. And then went to Peru to look at how people and different people react to low oxygen climates in the Andes. And then went to Germany, in the European Space Agency, so the astronaut corps is based there as a medical researcher. But I was really passionate about performance, and space is great, but you're dealing with astronauts with diplomatic assets there to promote space, not perform in space.
Yes.
So I was just curious about different PhDs, and I was actually going to go into cancer therapeutics research, way better and more impactful in the, but I was still passionate about performance, and this one PhD came up in Manchester, looking at the training sciences of sprinting. I applied and I got it, and that's where my story began, and I worked my way through that, I'm going to call it ladder or system, where I got into cycling. Now, if I may, like, how did I get from a PhD student to being a coach? I ended up being a sports scientist. I was publishing these papers. There was all this novel stuff I wanted to press, but a lot of the coaches were like, look, we're the most successful Olympic team. We don't need your help. Is our neck on the chopping block, not yours? And in the end, I got so frustrated. I said, I want my neck on the chopping block. I want to see if these ideas work. And that's where it started from. So I started off as the para tandem coach with British Cycling.
Yes.
Then I went to an amateur team, and then the Dutch, and then Ineos.
I say it so simply.
I did
just
think
did
that. Yeah. And what, out of those three environments, what stands out to you the most?
Good question. I think the biggest contrast, let's start with that, is the size. So every team I've been with hasn't been an equivalent. So British Cycling is the equivalent of a established organisation, like a blue chip company that's really big and loads of layers and money, and the limiting factor isn't money or resource, it's kind of application of. The amateur team I went to in Derby, it was like the startup. So you had very few resources, zero culture. I mean, there was a culture, but it was just get it done, perform, not like behaviours or anything like that. And then the Dutch was kind of what I call it, start off in the good old days, so after the startup, but before, trying to get to that level of high performance and consistently high performance. So it was that transitionary period where you look back and go, the good old days, to going to a more organised way of thinking. So that was the biggest contrast. Probably the biggest similarity was just trying to get the best out of people. The limiting factor I always thought was not limiting factor, but the thing that could take that next level was getting the best out of what you've got.
And you talk a lot about performance. What does that mean to you, and what have you learnt about that through those three different eras?
There are two sides or two aspects of performance when you look at it. It's like doing the best with what you've got. Like, so for example, if you finish fourth, that might be very good for a nation that's very limited, very small gene pool, so on and so forth. But a fourth can be a disaster for another team. So it's having but no one actually respects the fourth. It's always the winners they always look at. So it's what you view as successful with what you've got versus the actual success. I always try and look at the relative success of what you have, but the reality is I'd be lying to say you don't look at who's the world's best and how can you get to that, because that's what people want to get to in a in any leadership, whether it's coaching or not, you just want to be the best naturally.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be in that sort of position.
And sorry, Lee.
Sorry, you get them.
How do you get the best out of people? So what sort of things will you do as a coach or a leader to drive that, to get the best of what they've got out of them?
I would say the end goal of what you want it to be is like a bond of trust. I don't want to say relationship, because relationship kind of insinuates there's and it can be interpreted differently, but a bond of trust for people to believe what you're doing and you believe what they're telling you as well. How do you get there is not as simple, because like humans don't trust people naturally, particularly outsiders coming in, and it's a very hard thing to forge. But I think understanding is the first part of that. So getting to know people. Now, people might be listening to this thinking, well, I don't have much time, but there are small things you can do to get to understand people. And when you understand people, you can play to their lens on life or how they view things and their morals and values to get what you want. This is a really, really, like, probably not the best example, the one I can think of. For my PhD, I couldn't get the athletes to be part of my PhD study because people were like, we don't want to get you involved, it's a PhD, we want results now. And I was sitting in the hot desking area where the coaches are, and the only one that was left was one that really wasn't a hot desk. It was pictures of all his kids and everything else. And I was getting quite frustrated that I couldn't recruit anyone. Anyway, I was just looking at daydreaming into the partition, of all the timetables, and the coach comes up to me and goes, "That's my seat." And I was really tempted to go, "This is a hot desk."
Yeah.
But then I just thought, you know what, I might just play something here. And I just said, "Look, do you have the holidays for your kids coming up?" And he went, "Yeah, I'm really slammed with work. I've got too much coaching to do." I said, "Well, why don't you give me your athletes for 2 days? You can trust me with them. I'll do one testing that you want to do, testing I want to do for my PhD, and you get 2 days with your kids." And he went, "Yeah, sure."
Wow.
So it's more about just understanding the people, and I don't want to use the word selling to their need, because selling sounds like a bit like pushy or forceful, but how you can get the best outcomes for both parties and the greater good, or for the performance of everyone.
Yeah, so everybody wins.
Phrase. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
And a couple of things sprung to mind as you were speaking there, Medi, around, you mentioned about getting to the top, the world's best. How do you go about like the process in terms of innovation versus actually mirroring what others have done? What goes into that? Because it's the same in business, right? You know, like there'll be corporations and execs that look at performances of competitors.
Yeah.
Well, they'll go like, well, what's our strategy? Is it to copy the strategy of another organisation? Is it to tweak it? Is it to actually rip that out and try something else?
There's a few things on that. So, number one, innovation usually means, or people think it to believe, like more money, cutting edge science. I think innovation is just simply doing something better, and usually, in my case, saving money. When I got to the Dutch as well, the Dutch team, you know, they were just on the upward ascendancy, and I think they were just trying to copy the British cycling model of marginal gains. Like, we have to make sure that we hedge all our bets and do these little tweaks here, that when it all comes together, the aggregation will be, you know, a lot bigger. But we didn't have the money, the resource, or the expertise in terms of, you know, we weren't as, you know, we had one mechanic rather than 20 or 10 or whatever it is. So it was more about, and again, I can't think of a nice, slick corporate name for this, but going from marginal gains to major gains, just make a priority, what's going to move the needle, and we focused on that. So from an engineering perspective, from the Dutch, skin suits and overshoes, so the fabric you're wearing, has the biggest impact on performance, like a 10% swing from the best and the worst in the market. So all I cared about was just focusing on what's going to move the needle the most, which was those two. And that had like 2 or 3 good sort of outcomes or projections, because the first one is, number one, everyone knows what you're prioritizing. Number 2, it's an easy message to transmit that everyone can absorb and understand. And number 3, when they saw me, they knew what I was going to ask them and what I was after. So, you know, whenever I spoke to the riders, update on skin suits and overshoes, don't care about anything else. When I see sponsors, they know exactly what I'm going to ask, where and when. Board members, they know what I'm going to ask. So it's a very clear, easy, simple way of transmitting what you're about, but also making people know that, you know, what you're about and what you're hunting after, rather than just being like, I don't know what he's thinking, I don't know what he's after. You know, there's too much going on.
And that seems quite radical in some ways,
I was going to say that,
actually,
not
because, you know, like for cycling particularly, you'd think bike. But we've had Ed Clancy on the show, and he was absolutely aerodynamicist. That was his way of thinking, and he spoke a lot about that. So it's really interesting that you say a similar thing, because as a non-cyclist, you'd have no idea in terms of the process. And just relating it back to business, I wonder how many people, you know, for example, I've seen it where they're focused on product, and actually what they've not done is look at the commercials around, set up around what they've got currently. And again, you talked about actually innovation could be about saving money.
Yeah, and sorry, just picking up, I just remembered, you talk about looking at competitors. So Ed Clancy you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant guy, love him. Yeah, I should actually get in touch with him actually again, see how he is. But anyway, but like when I watched a talk once with someone at Team Sky, and they said we never look at our opposition, we just focus on us. I thought it was quite radical. I do get the principle, because, you know, having been in that seat and decision making process, when you start seeing what other people are doing and panicking, you just lose focus on what you've got. And I kind of, like, I do look at opposition, I do, but almost like a rear view mirror. Like you have your direction of travel, you glance every now and again, but you can't change what you're already doing. Like if you're good enough, you'll have your priorities like we talked about, and if they develop what they develop, like good for them, but they're not us. We can't, you know, there's a reason why we've gone for what we've gone for. There's a reason probably why they've gone what they've gone for. And the more we get distracted, the more kind of confusing it's going to get, and it just causes more panic. So yeah, all I cared about was skin suit and overshoes. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were other things that we looked at that, you know, if the time, resource, opportunity came about, we'd go into it. And I think that was like tyres and I think wheels in the end. But the reality of it is everything else we couldn't change, or it wouldn't move the needle. So why stress about it? So if British Cycling and Ed came with something even better, like great, like their bike, you know, was quite like it caught the eye of a lot of people, but we couldn't change it, and so why worry about it?
I think you're known, Medi, for challenging that conventional thinking. I think that's what leaders say, really, in terms of being quite radical in that space. And we're talking about leaders out there. What is it within you that allows you to do that? Or and you talked early on as well about I'll take the flak, I'll take that accountability, and, you know, be able to stand strong in something that others might go, oh, this might not work. What is it in you that drives you to do that, and what could we learn from that?
I'm not entirely sure, but I mean, and I'm thinking as I'm talking here.
Yeah.
Like I have this desperation to win.
Yeah.
And I don't like making excuses. Now, I'm not saying like I don't make an excuse. I make an excuse all the time, but in terms of I just can't settle for just being mediocre or having an excuse or pointing at something and being the victim. Like you want to drive things forward, and you just don't take no for an answer.
Yeah.
And I guess the reason why I say that, in all the success I've had with the 3 different teams, I've been on 4 different teams, the last one, I haven't won, if you want to call it that, or improved the team the same way. So one has been, you know, in-race strategy. One's been just making use of something better that we already had. One's been focusing on something else. One's been about like trying to change a mindset. So there's never been like a template that, you know, what you get from me is what you're always going to get, like whether it's cultural, process driven, outcome driven. It's just whatever is going to move that needle forward is what you have to do.
And I think that's so relevant, because it goes back to your principle that you said all along about performances. Use what you've got to the best of your ability, like right now. Ultimately, like how it's not, there's no one size fits all. You know, you see all the time on certain platforms where you say, do these 5 things and you'll be amazing. Actually, what you're saying is it's about context.
It is, and I think, like, you know, when you talked about me earlier about, you know, how do I view myself, or what, and that's why I'm kind of struggling to kind of say it, because I'm not a, you know, a systems performance leader, or I'm because I've just been in so many different situations and contexts. It doesn't fit that. So I think, you know, the best ability in leadership is adaptability. So you're not moving away from your values or your principles or who you are, but you have to tweak yourself to be different versions of yourself to the situation that presents itself.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm hearing that all the way through, that adaptability, that flexibility, that human element, and getting to know your people. So I'm going to dive into, if you were to take on a new team now, you know, how do you go about understanding what they need? So I know there's a lot of research and data and science. How much of it is that versus intuition and getting to know the people? So what sort of things might you do to get to know the team and decide, right, this is how I'm going to play this one?
I'm very unapologetic about, despite having a career that's needed data, that I don't default to it.
Yeah.
So I only go, data is just information, numbers. But, you know, everyone goes, yeah, there's no opinion to it, but there's error in it. So the same error you have in a subjective thought or feeling or opinion, you know, it can be translated to a number, but we just don't appreciate that. So I actually, for me, I go with my gut feeling, but what I do is say, okay, where are we? The lay of the land, where are we at in terms of performance? Yeah. Look at what we've got and try and bridge the gap. Now, whether it's a team that I've inherited or hired, you know, the principle still says the same, that we have to try and get the best out of them. But ultimately, it's on me to communicate and for them to absorb my strategy, my vision, or whatever it is, or what they need from them to move the needle. So it's almost bringing them along with the journey with you and just simplifying things. Just say, look, from you, if we get this, this is what we're going to get. And don't say it once, because one of the key things I kind of realise is, and this is something with riders, I remember presenting this great one-slide strategy of how we're going to qualify for the Olympics, like which World Cups we're not going to go to because we can't afford it, how we're going to project to the results we're going to get, the improvement, and I just thought it was this bulletproof strategy, and like 2 minutes later we're finished. Like, so what are we doing for this World Cup? Are we going to this World Cup? So anyway, you have to keep banging the drum, so when they see you, they know what you're going to ask them.
Yes.
You're predictable in a good way.
Yes.
So like, I know this guy wants this from me, and also the message is like constantly being told to them.
I love that consistency comes through as well, really strongly. So like the messages, the communication, saying it as often as possible. People know what to expect when they work with you and they turn up with you. I have one of the questions that comes actually from a lot of our leaders. Like if you get a new team or you inherit a team and their performance is vastly different, how might you approach that? You know, do you focus on the top performer and get them to the best, or you know the one that isn't performing? How do you work with such a mixed, diverse team?
Taking one step back,
Yeah.
What do I think a good leader or coach does?
Yeah.
It drives the average up. They drive the average up, or the standard up, which is an average. A star performer will always be a star performer, with or without you. So they will focus on whatever they need. If you put in sporting context, you know, they'll get their sleep, their nutrition, their training, they'll prioritise themselves. Your job isn't the person to take that star performer to continue being a star performer. You can help them, you can tweak it, but it's getting that average up. So you would focus on the weaker performers is probably the wrong phrase, but the people who aren't performing as highly.
Yes.
And the general stand, like what is accepted and what is not accepted, and then try and understand why that's happened. If it's a competency issue, then you have to sort of rethink the personnel. If it's well, it can be whatever actually, but you know, there has to be an underlying reason why people aren't performing. Then you have to get to the bottom of it and make action. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say that you can turn everyone around. Some people have checked out, some people don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And as a leader, you have to own it. You can't turn it around for every single person.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't mean you should try and just see what's happening. And ultimately, you have to make a decision at some point. Now, for me, I was in a lot of public-funded teams two out of the 14. So you can't just go around with a shotgun sacking people.
No.
So you have to really try and work with them, and just sort of, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, trying to understand them, like what is stopping them from being the best version of themselves, and how you can tap into that.
And has there been a time where you've had to deliver difficult messages on selection, on competencies, on application, and how do you go about it? Because it seems like a constant theme that it appears difficult, and we're asking more and more of leaders.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think we are.
Need to do it.
I don't think we are asking more and more. Like, that's your job. And I think we're getting less. The word isn't confrontational, but to have a hard conversation. And let me just make something clear here. Like, I've messed this up a lot, so it's not as if like I was always the finished article. But if I may, just give you a story that really has influenced the way I view communicating. It's got nothing to do with sport. When I was 15, and this is a long, long time ago, so email was in its infancy. I wanted to be a doctor. So this is before the university kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And you could just ring up the hospitals, be bounced around, and try and organise your own work experience. So before you go into A-levels, you want to show like you have work experience. I was 15 at the time. Anyway, I get put through to this ward. I don't even know what it was. They've got bounced around the switchboard, and then the person on the reception said, when's your half term? And I said, this day. Just turn up when you want on this Monday, and I'll see you then. So, okay, cool.
Brilliant.
That was it. No letter of confirmation, no wave, no signing, no nothing. So turn up on that day, looking for this person, and to cut a long story short, I end up on the oncology ward. And this is I was in a place of privilege, but also I should never have been there at the same time. And it was a brilliant social experiment to just observe, which you wouldn't get ethical approval now. I ended up shadowing a doctor telling people they had cancer.
Wow.
And I was 15 years old. Like, I didn't want to, my interests weren't in that, and I remember just following him around, and after the second or third time, I just realised he was saying exactly the same thing, which was something to the lines of, the results have come back, or the test results have come back, you have stage 3 cancer, this is very serious, and if you're not treated, you'll die. My colleagues and I coming back in timeline, the afternoon, to come and discuss options. And I thought that was brutal, because you saw people from being quite stoic, saying, thank you, doctor, I'll see you soon. Yeah. People on the floor wailing, crying. Now, on my reflection, I always thought you have to tailor it to the person and how you communicate it. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I realised, not true. Like, communication, and if you go into any conference, how many people have been in a meeting where one of the outcomes where you have to communicate better? I'm sure everyone put their hand up. Keep your hands up, if you know what that means. I'm sure everyone put their hand down. Where I'm going with this now is, like, that doctor seemed quite brutal.
Yes.
But he was an excellent communicator for 3 reasons. So, and I've kind of modelled it off what he said. Number 1, he named it, which is, the results have come back, you have cancer.
Yeah.
There is no misinterpretation or wiggle room for understanding. Like, that message has landed. So that's the foundational thing. Second thing, he's kind of framed it, what it means. If you do not get treated, you will die. Again, is there any room for misinterpretation? No. And then he's given he's assigned it or given a plan, which is, okay, we're going to come back in the afternoon and deal with it with some kind of planning of how we're going to treat it. And is those 3 principles is how I communicate now. If I need to land a message when I tell a rider that they can't ride, or that they haven't hit the standard, is like, you haven't hit the standard that we expect for you going into a race, and therefore you're not racing. This doesn't, it's not a personal thing or a cultural thing or behavioural issue. This is a performance issue. But me or another coach is going to get in touch with you, and we're going to figure out how this is not going to happen again. Love
that. Name it, frame it, assign it.
That's it.
That's a new method for giving feedback. I love that.
But I think that's where, so going back to having hard conversations, having a framework or kind of a basis to work with something like that is good, but I haven't got that right my whole career, and I think people should, when you go into leadership, people think that it's a warm, fuzzy role.
Yes.
And it can be for 5% of the time. But the reality of it is, you have to have hard conversations. You have to tell people that you're dealing with their careers and livelihoods here. That saying, you're going to be leaving the program. But it's about when you're communicating well, you're not trying to make a connection. You're not trying to build rapport. You're just trying to land a message, so they completely understand, like without any room for error. So like saying things like, "This is uncomfortable for me." They don't care.
No.
That's your job. They don't want to have like small talk. They don't want to do give them a positive, negative, and a positive sandwich. Like, it's just, they might not agree with it, but they understand it.
And it's interesting because just relating it to football for a second, so I've heard like Pochettino didn't tell the people that weren't getting into the squad. He didn't communicate with them. He was like, they don't want to call, really. So I'm going to deal with the people that I am. And I've heard other coaches that have then gone and communicated, whichever method they've used. I think Tuchel, a few players they got in touch with.
FaceTime, wasn't it?
Yeah. So there's two like different methods, and I'm just like curious because we've talked a lot today about actually know the individual, build on trust. It's not necessarily about relationships. So it's interesting how all that comes together around what's the best thing to do at a given moment. But I love the clarity that you've just used within that framework, however much you tweak it then for an individual.
Yeah, and I think delivering bad news, firstly, everyone loves delivering good news, don't they?
Yeah,
It's the easiest thing to do. But delivering the bad news, which in leadership you have to do, particularly in sport, if you want to do well, there has to be people who are disappointed, and you can't win. So I can't believe him. He FaceTimed. He didn't say it face to face. Say it face to face. Oh, he would. He should have just called me. I didn't really care. Just tell me. So there is no winning. I personally prefer saying it as close to as face to face as possible. So if I can't be there for whatever reason, try and do a FaceTime or a phone call. I wouldn't like to do it via email, or not to tell them. If you didn't make the WhatsApp group, I don't know what it is now, but like that's just for me, because you have to, whether they don't like it or they do like it, you got to do what's comfortable for you, and you just cannot win.
There's so much for leaders to take from our conversation today, Mehdi. I'm really interested to hear where are you currently at? What are you focused on? What are you looking at from a leadership or coach perspective? What's your real focus now?
At the moment, I'm in between jobs where I'm really focusing on mentoring head coaches and performance directors and people in the corporate world, in the leadership space. But I am really keen on fighting for a badge. I love being part of a team.
Yes.
Almost view teams as like families, dysfunctional, but when it comes down to it, you care about one thing, which is, well, in sports, winning.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that current focus, is there anything in particular that leaders, your coaching leaders around at the moment, that's becoming really important, to keep us future-proofed as a leadership population? What are the things that you are talking about a lot?
Emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people who I speak to, like me, wants clean org charts, and stuff like that, and not understanding the emotional side of things, that humans are emotional.
Yes.
and unpredictable and messy, like we've talked about. And I'll say something that's common in sport that I just hate hearing, is like, if I had their talent, I'd be amazing. But you don't have their talent. You don't have their blessing or their burden. You haven't grown up someone always saying you're amazing or whatever it is.
Yes.
You don't have that mentality. So, stop talking about it. Stop looking it through their eyes, what they've been through, and see how you can frame things or put things through their eyes, rather than just saying, I would do this, or it just doesn't stick.
No, absolutely not. And as a leader, how do we gain more emotional intelligence? How do we understand, where we're at, and also understand our people? What sort of things can we do?
That's a really good question. As far as I've got with it, not very many, at least sports coaching qualifications, really explore that.
No.
It's very tactical and technical. I wouldn't know. I guess first and foremost, having something like that communication thing I spoke about. I'm not saying you should, roll out what I've said. Maybe you can. I don't know.
Yeah.
But having things of how to deliver bad news, or different ways of making awareness of how to deliver bad news, or just putting them in a part of the whether it's a leadership or coaching qualification, of just, I'm not a big fan of role plays, but putting them in situations where
Yes.
you know it would happen to them, and see how it would work and the dynamic there. So just making an awareness as a first step. I haven't really seen much research in emotional intelligence, so and I can't really tell you how I've got it or how I've appreciated it in the past. But I think at least showing an awareness and demonstrating that to the people would be a very good first step.
Absolutely. And actually we're hearing so much now around the human side of leadership, where we started this conversation. You started there that said, you know, I did things differently and I tried to work with the individuals and get the best out of what they've got. You know, I think that is a natural draw to emotional intelligence. And I think we've been in a corporate leadership world in the past where that wasn't the main focus, so it wasn't as important. And now it's becoming really important in this space, you know, and how leaders are asking, how do I tap into some of that side and some, you know, the human side, which for me is the emotional intelligence side.
Just reflecting now, one of the big things I've learned is you should stop having meetings when there are problems. So people usually associate a meeting when something hasn't gone to plan, you know, someone's acting up,
Yes.
or something isn't right. And the big thing I kind of had with the Dutch in particular, which was the second half of my chapter, when we got to the elite level and we were just trying to keep elite and stay that way, was having a half an hour window for each rider and member of staff that they could just come speak to me. Now, they didn't have to take it every week, but some people did.
Yes.
And you just have a 30-minute dedicated spot for them. And I used to open it up saying, this is your time, what do you want to talk about? They're seen, they're heard. And it was the best 8-hour investment I made in my whole career every week, because you can get a temperature of the room, you can see things are manifesting, you can nip things in the bud proactively rather than just being, right, okay, we need a meeting, this isn't good enough, what we're doing. You know, when, I don't know if can I swear on this?
Yeah. Okay.
You can't put shit back into a horse. So, you know, if it's out there, you know, you want it's done.
Yeah.
So you want to be proactive before it gets to that stage.
Honestly, I'm smiling inside, right? Because and I've worked in organisations where they do that, and it's really productive. And if you're one of the person being listened to, if you're listening to somebody, it's a really enriched time. I'm in an environment recently where there's none of that. They've asked me for feedback in terms of an organisation. I'm like, it'd be great. You're talking about the badge as well. It'd be great if actually you were listened to occasionally.
Yeah.
It'd be wonderful. And then they go, oh, well, there's no time for that.
Yeah, but that's something I was going to say. And when people then talk about, okay, it doesn't have to be 30 minutes.
No.
It can be 15
Yeah,
minutes, and we can pick it up if there's something up. But it's just like, you know, a lot of people just say that. And like I said, at the time, I was going through a lot of, well, it wasn't the best moment of my career in terms of how I was performing and acting and feeling. And everyone was going, and I was saying to myself, like, these 8 hours a week, like, what am I doing? But I knew I had to do something different to kind of take it to a better level. And in the end, it was the best investment of time, because like I said, I had people on the ground, like a strength and conditioning coach to the gym work. I didn't need to be that. It was better use of my time hearing and listening to someone rather than just, you know, trying to micromanage. Not that I was micromanaging, or being on the floor and being completely present, just being, as you just said, listened to and being sort of acknowledged is almost as powerful as anything else. I
had a lot of time thinking. It was interesting you were talking about emotional intelligence, because someone asked me yesterday over WhatsApp. So I've just done Land's End to John O'Groats, and I'm a non-cyclist, so 1,023 miles was extreme. It's one of the best achievements of my life. But the thing was, I learned more about myself on that trip than any course has ever taught me, or any psychometric test has taught me. And it was in that element of, and I was really curious around it actually, around what will it look like when you're under pressure in that environment, to then how will you deal with the things that come up on a day-to-day basis. And I don't know, but I'm really curious around them. So I think there's something on leaders as well about acknowledging what situations they are facing. You know, you've talked a lot there about hindsight and reflection, and I just wonder your views around building that into a leader's practice as well as it being reliant on a coach to give them that?
Well, I think you can keep those principles of meeting with people and establishing those relationships on a non-negative situation. But also, I just think for leadership, it's all, maybe I'm kind of going for a bit of a tangent here, but it's all well and good leading when things are rosy. It's your real test of leadership is when you're under pressure, when you're stress testing, and you really see how the org chart and the agency like really sort of stacks up and how strong it is there. It's really easy to panic when you're under pressure. Not panic, that's the wrong word, to react differently, but it's actually keeping that consistency might be the route to steering it out of that stormy situation. So yeah, I would say to leaders, don't wait for something bad to happen to install something, be proactive about it. And there's it's a much better investment of your time to understand the people than being on the tools yourself, because they're hired to do that job, not you.
Do you know, everything that you say is like grounded in like positive psychology. Like it's always about proactive work. It's always about the gain, not the gap, actually, you know, and what can we do to move things forward. And I think that's really refreshing with a really human side to it, and some absolutely fantastic practical techniques in there that people can try as it is, or they can adapt themselves. So no wonder that you're working in the corporate leadership space. You know, there's so much that we can learn from your journey and from sport. And actually there's very little in there that you've talked about sport as it is. Actually, there's a lot of stuff around the ways that you do this, that you've learned and moved it forward, but it's ever evolving. I feel like it's ever evolving. And even the innovation part was like, just do something better, let's move it forward, let's progress. And I think if as leaders we just took a bit more of that mindset, then we would move things forward with our people. And I think we could talk all morning about this. It's been absolutely fantastic to have you as part of this podcast. I've loved listening to you, and I could hear a lot more of your stories, because I know there are a lot more under that. So we'll have to come back and do some of those again.
Yeah, if you have me again. If England win the World Cup,
Yes.
come back here.
We will, definitely. That's a good deal. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
And one final question from me.
Sure.
So who could we get in the hot seat where you're sat now that has inspired you in leadership or been part of your journey along the way?
Very good question. I think the person, I haven't met this person, by the way, so I have to verify it, was Phil Jackson, the Chicago Bulls coach.
Wow.
Because he was the first person to talk about emotional intelligence that I've read of, that isn't just, this is how we do things, I'm the drill sergeant, I say jump, you say how high, how we manage the players, how he kind of talks about it. It's those, and he, excuse me, had to coach a lot of mavericks who would demand a lot for themselves. So I'd be very curious to know how he managed the whole team. And you know, I've heard little anecdotes about he gave books. I mean, this is the 90s, so
yeah.
books were still a thing.
Still have a book.
There was no podcast, no leadership podcast. But he gave books for people to read that he'd actually think of them and say, I think this is a good book for you to read, and they discuss it or whatever it might be. But I'd love to have a good insight into how he viewed the world, because it just seemed he was ahead of the curve in how he approached it.
Amazing. Phil Jackson.
Amazing, thank you. That's a wrap, folks. Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Leadership Actually.
Thank you.